Fulcrum of Truth. How you
Another
doing?
episode. Good. We going another back-to-back videos is how I'd like to do it.
Yeah, that's what we have to do. We've got some good response from the last video, and as a result of that, I kind of want to do a little bit of a follow-up, even on that topic with the light.
Okay, good. Yeah.
But specifically, it's a little different. I want to talk about the Big Bang, and I want to stress that we call it the Big Bang Theory, right? And I'm not talking about the TV show. And when you hear this word theory, that's like the scientists' escape clause from, oh, well, it's just a theory, right? So we have the Big Bang Theory, and we have the theory of gravity, and we have quantum theory, and we
You
have all
know,
these
I
theories,
bro,
right?
you bringing up this topic, which I'll say is like new, right? So we can also tell the viewers. So this time, Dave didn't tell me what the topic was before we started, and we're
Yeah,
going to start doing that just so that we have a little bit more lively entrance into the conversation.
more candid.
Yeah, sometimes it can be a little dry starting out. So to get the topic by surprise in front of you guys, I think it would be better for us to discuss it that way. But so you bringing up theory and hypothesis. I mean, I've written there's pages in my book about this where we've looked up the definition of hypothesis and theory and broke down the wording of exactly what these definitions are. And in the end, the difference was negligible. Like the difference between, I wish I had the book right now to be able to go over it with you, but the difference between a hypothesis and a theory is absolutely negligible.
Yeah, and I guess what I just want to pull out of that, because I really want to talk about the Big Bang.
Yeah,
That's what
you
I want to
just
talk
triggered
about.
me with this
But the
talk
word
about theory.
theory is important to explain. And we like to explain our words and how we're using them. And this word theory for me is used so much within the scientific community. And apologies if you can hear the cat scratching herself.
Yeah,
Um,
that's Beasley.
but um, the word theory is used in the title of things, but then they are presented as fact,
Yeah,
right? So we say, oh, the Big Bang Theory, and then we tell you things as if they're fact,
yeah.
but we can always go and escape and say, oh, well, that's just a theory.
This bleeds into the understanding of the simplest form of things, right? And being able to understand that a theory or a hypothesis or a person's concept that hasn't necessarily been proven out, or, I mean, in all honesty, anything that is considered to be a fact or science, okay, that you can't stand on that as a foundation of truth because it's really just an understanding that we have at the time. And until something changes about that understanding, that's just the best we can do until then. And you have to wrap that into all your theories and understanding rather than explaining things as fact, explaining things as this is what we know is the way it is.
Yeah, we know nothing. And even things that we call laws, they get changed,
Yeah.
right? We've seen over time the law of this, the law of that, thermodynamics, whatever. We literally had to create a zeroth law of
Yeah.
thermodynamics because the first law wasn't fundamental
Yeah,
enough.
I'll throw in
So
that.
we,
I'll throw in that funny story that I had just told you too about talking to the girl, and she's telling me about her having her engineering degree, and she studied thermodynamics and divergence and convergence and all that. And I said, "Oh yeah, well I wrote the negative first law of thermodynamics," and she didn't know what to say in response to that. And that I joked with you about that months ago, you know.
yeah. So even things we call laws, you just need to recognize that most of these things out here are theories, and the word theory is an escape clause for a scientist to say, well, it's just a theory, right?
Yeah.
If it's wrong, I wasn't wrong. I was just theorizing about it,
Yeah. And
right?
let me
And
point
that's
out a
fine.
let me point out a very good example of how that is. The theory that they used to have on what Venus was like,
Yeah,
the planet as a planet, its atmosphere, the chemicals that made it up, what its surface was like. These were all theories that they had. And then they sent a satellite there and crashed it, a probe, and they learned all their theories were wrong. This is one of our closest bodies in space,
right. Our neighbor.
and they were completely wrong about all their theories. So, what do you think their really chances of getting it right when we're extending out to the edge of the solar system into our galaxy? And I mean, it's to me, it's I hate to say it this way, but it's very I think it's wasted resources, wasted minds, wasted really talent that could be spent working on things that we
I
can
don't
be
want to
sure
say
about.
it's wasted. I think there's still value to it, but I won't go that far. Um, but I guess what I want to, what I'm pointing out here is that we are basing this discussion, my discussion, on the Big Bang, and that's going to be based on the current theories of the time. And we'll talk about some of that. We mentioned it in the last video about when you talk about dark energy and the reason we think the Big Bang happened is all based on this idea that when we look far enough out, we see this redshift in light. And we conclude that because we see that redshift, the universe must be expanding. And if the universe is expanding, then if we roll that in reverse, then eventually it collapses on itself. Right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's the theory. I'm going to take
Not
that
only
as.
that, but also stated as they believe since it's expanding, it must have come from a single point.
Right.
Right.
And
So
I'm just going to take that as true in this discussion.
that's hard.
I know.
That is,
and we can talk about the alternatives.
That's
but
a lattice of theories, to create. Now, I'm actually not against the theory of the
I'm
Big
not
Bang.
either.
I do, but when you put it that way, it really pointed out or highlighted what we were just talking about. The way it's these series of theories that lead to our understanding, and we're going to just agree that those are all qualified.
Right. It's a theory that's based on a theory that's based on a theory, and the word theory just means I don't know.
Yeah.
When you boil it down, right? So let's talk about the Big Bang, because I'm not opposed to that as a concept. I believe that the universe could have come from a singularity,
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
I mean, we use that word a lot differently
Yeah.
in our studies, but the word that's commonly used is a singularity. But to me, if the Big Bang occurred the way that it is explained, then for me, the exact opposite must have happened at the same time, right? And so if our universe came from a singularity and emerged into the way it is, with time rolling forward and this expansion, then the exact opposite must have also happened.
Or is happening at the same time, right?
Happening at the same time, right?
Yeah.
That another universe emerged that's going in reverse,
Yeah.
from what we are.
This actually, we've talked about this too in the book. I have something called the Proverse and the Reverse.
Yeah.
This is exactly what you're talking about. This is the understanding that time is moving forward and backwards at the same time, and always. And, that starting point that everything came from spreads out into an infinity, but that infinity is also just another singularity that's spreading out backwards into the infinity, which is the first singularity that we're talking about, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're just in different forms, and different perceptions and different perspectives of those two things at different points are going to give you a different reality or a different take on it. I mean, this is this is the whole understanding that it is and it isn't, right? We are, even though we live in an infinity right now, and it looks as though to be an infinity as we look out in space, it's still one universe. And this singularity being an infinity and a singularity is the basis of all understanding that I have, and I think that you've begun to see in the universe.
Yeah, absolutely. And if we did come from that singularity, the universe itself, and I don't want to use the words anti-universe, but I can't really think of a different way of saying.
Well, the Proverse and Reverse.
Proverse and Reverse.
The one
right.
we're in is a Proverse. Time moves forward as we perceive it, and then Reverse would be the time moving in reverse as they would perceive it.
Right. It makes me question, like, how are these two things interrelated to each other? How do they impact each other? Science talks a lot about vacuum energy. They talk about if you have a photon that's a certain energy, it can spontaneously split into an electron and a positron, and it can recombine and then just keep going as a photon again. Or
Well, the full breakdown of quantum physics and actually just the quantum level of atomic structure and all that stuff. The collider and all that, all the maps of the colliders. This is all positive and negative and polar opposite particles that exist every time they explode. There's an anti this and a positive this in basically every form throughout as you go down through the layers of the particle and subatomic particles. So I think I think that's kind of what you're explaining, right? The fact that there's this polar opposite duality that exists in everything, in all of nature.
Everything we see.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when we take a complete vacuum, scientists say, oh, well, inside that vacuum, things are still boiling. Things are being created and destroyed instantaneously, too fast for us to like measure them. And, by the limits of the universe, you cannot measure them, but it's happening. And then you get this energy that's in the vacuum. And that's possible. And this is why I don't dispute that. But if we're going to say that things can be spontaneously created and destroyed, and the method by which they do this is to create their polar opposites, their exact opposites, then when we talk about the Big Bang, I don't discount it. It's possible. But if it happened, then I'm fairly certain that the exact opposite happened at the same time.
Yeah, I actually just had a little bit of a thought about the Big Bang because, we talk about these theories and how they fall over time. And we also have been seeing, I see more and more YouTube videos pop up talking about, is this the end of space-time? Like, what's wrong with string theory? People are really highlighting and identifying all the pitfalls of all these unifying theories that we have. And it's showing just clearly and blatantly that they're not the correct answer. And not even part of it, most likely, right? So
Yeah, what I'll say is I don't see a lot of original thought. I see a lot of things that are regurgitating the same
we'll go back to those thoughts, right?
But
So these theories that they're having, and they're getting criticism all the time now, like you said, they are where we derived the Big Bang theory from.
sure. And I'm sure we're going to get criticism for saying these things, and
But
that's fine.
But you know what I mean? Like if we're, everybody talks about how these other, string theory and all of these kind of theories of everything, propositions that people have made, supersymmetry, string theory, quantum physics, quantum field, all this stuff, they all lead to how they explain the Big Bang. And if they fall, we're not talking about what's another possible way the universe came into existence. Do you know of any other universal creation scientific explanations other than the Big Bang?
That's a good question. And no, I don't. And that's part of the problem. There's nothing to fall back on. There's no challenges. Nobody's out there saying, oh, well, and I'm not even trying to myself. But yeah, when you have a situation where there are no challenges to the theory, what else are you supposed to believe?
Yeah, dependability of past knowledge principle, right? This is where it always circles back to that in terms of how we get new thinking and new thoughts. And, the Big Bang is definitely a piece of past knowledge that people are depending on when they're having all their thoughts about things in the universe and physics and how things come to be and how they might go back to be. And I think that, for me, I hate to say it like this, I can't divert from the Big Bang due to just, the understanding.
I can't either.
Yeah, the understanding of the Big Bang came to me from a physics perspective and what I understood and was learning in research, but also from that other metaphysical source and that other divine energy, when the way somebody might get it through meditation, I've been, so it's like in my heart to feel as though we came from a singularity and that we split into an infinity. So whether or not the physical explanation of the Big Bang in terms of like the way forces and the way they split and the way matter split and elements were created and the way the universe cooled down and all that, whether or not that's the actual explanation for what happened or even remotely close, I still have a gut instinct and a feeling in my heart that is nearly divine that says, we came from a single point and this is how we are all part of one thing.
Yeah, I accept that. And that is a lot of where my belief in God came from. And we talked about that in a different video that, my feelings are that God is the universe itself. And we're part of the universe, and therefore we're part of God. So I'm okay with the Big Bang Theory, and the idea that our universe came from a singularity. I just, I'm more focused on that idea of, if it came into existence in the positive, it also had to come into existence in the negative.
Yeah.
And where is that? Can we experience that? Can we feel that? Can we test it? Where
Well,
is it? Is it on top of us? Is it?
it should be on top of us. That's what the theory goes into in the book. I mean, we have the way we have light and dark here, right? There would be dark and light there, right? We would see dark there. Everything would be inverse on the other side, right? On top of this, to add in, we want to go real esoteric here.
Yeah,
Okay.
go ahead.
We have life and death, duality of life and death, right? In our existence. There would be a whole nother side of life and death. The same way we have light and dark here, there would be an anti-light and dark on the other side, right? There would be a life and death here and a life and death there. So
It's almost,
four
what you're
versions.
describing is almost heaven, right?
No.
A place where death is life.
Not necessarily, because I already kind of feel as though, actually, yes, you're right. That is where that theory goes, and I think that's what the book actually said. I haven't had the book in like a year and a half now since I've written it, but I think that's where that goes, and is explaining that time is different on the other side. The pendulum of life and death is what we're talking about, and yeah, the universe you're talking about being created in parallel to the universe we're experiencing now, the reverse, if we want to call it, may possibly be the death version of our life. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and the reason I wanted to get into this is because we talked about light and how it can swirl around and be impacted by gravity, and what we're observing isn't necessarily real.
Yeah.
What we're seeing.
If I can interrupt you before I forget this, because it adds in right to what I was just saying. Another phenomena that occurs for this explanation of life and death, and the other side being death, and there being a reverse universe out there that was created with the Big Bang, is sleep. So every day, human beings have to go through this almost half and half, where they have to sleep every 24 hours, or they begin to basically go crazy and die. And that is something that human beings have never really fleshed out for an explanation, but it goes into the understanding that when we sleep, it could be that other side as well.
I love this topic.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to add it in because I knew it really fits.
Do you want to go down that road?
No, we can go back into
save
light.
that
This
for
is
another.
yeah. This is
Okay.
sequencing in with what we talked about last time, so we can go to the light. But I wanted to just say that because it really does add right in. It fits like a puzzle piece into what we were just talking about. Life and death, being awake and being asleep, consciousness and unconsciousness, and I have the infinity diagrams going into on the book that show all these senses and relationships of what we can have, and it's really a beautiful thing when you think about how balanced it is.
Getting back to light and the way I kind of described in our last video one idea for why dark matter may be present and why dark energy may be present. But I have other ideas on it too. And one of them is this idea that the Big Bang, we're in that proverse, that forward moving, forward expanding universe. But at the same time, another universe, exact opposite, was created that's moving backward.
Yeah.
Backward through time, backward through expansion, collapsing back down to a singularity. And when I try to lay these things, and I've not done it on paper, but when I try to lay these things over one another, and I think, okay, we're moving along this forward line, but at the same time, there's this other line coming back, and we intersect with each other. And right now, I want to say we see something like 10% real matter, 30% dark matter, and then the rest is dark energy, right?
Uh,
And so I try to think where in this loop of overlapping would that
how does it look?
combination happen?
I actually never drew this diagram in the
Yeah.
book. It was
where
one of the.
where would that happen?
So you're talking.
Where are we on this?
Yeah,
Like,
you're essentially talking about a singularity branching into an infinity, while at the other end, where we have an infinity, it is singularities spreading back into another infinity, which is the first singularity. This is literally what we talked about just about 10 minutes ago, right? And I can give you, I've never drawn the diagram, but I can give you an understanding of a model for it in the universe that shows both, okay? And it might help to connect. At least I think it's a good model. So human beings, all right? So the universe is infinite, okay, supposedly, and there's infinite elements, and there's infinite mixture, and there's infinite everything out there, right? We have infinity out there. Anything is possible. And what we see is that all of the infinite things out in the universe have come together into human beings. Okay, so the elements that make up our bodies, we essentially have everything in our bodies. You can find everything from the universe caught up inside of us. There's a little piece of everything in the universe inside of human bodies. Okay, now even life, right? Now, with that being said, human beings are one thing. Life is one thing. Okay, but you could say that we all are part of one consciousness, one thing.
you know how I feel about the word thing.
Yeah, that's our favorite thing, right? So with our consciousness and life and everything in the universe being the infinite nature of the universe being embodied into a singularity of human beings, this is infinity coming back down to a singularity in the form of life and human beings. It's a single thing. Now, what's hard to grasp is that that single thing is also infinity in the individual human beings that we have. Okay? So every single human being is a singularity, which is part of a huge infinity of life and human beings. Okay? And on the other end, we have the scattered infinity of the universe coming down in strings, making human beings that are all culminating everything together. But that universe is all one universe.
Right.
And that's how the web expands on one end on the other, while it collapses on one end on the other.
It's all one and it's all infinity at the same time, always.
So in terms of
never.
grasping it in light, like you're saying, like bringing that understanding and principle to a model with light is difficult, but I think that that's the system, that's the map that needs to be understood.
Yeah, and I'm leaving the light thing here a little bit, right? I put the light thing aside.
Well,
we see the light, we think, we observe the expansion of the universe, and from that expansion we roll time in reverse and we say, well, then the universe must have come from a singularity. But I don't know that that's right at all. But it doesn't mean that the idea that we came from a singularity isn't right.
No, but I'm going to add another layer in for light. This is something that if we didn't say it, people would be yelling at us right now.
Yeah, sure.
So light splits with a prism.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And in that we see one single light, which is infinite colors, but in a single light as white, right? And what we perceive to be white. But when it hits that prism, it spits into a spectrum of infinite individual colors. You could pick out one of those colors and put it on a piece of paper and say, all right, that's pink, or that's one shade off from pink.
Magenta.
Right? Yeah, magenta, whatever you want to call it. You can pick individual single colors out of that spectrum that comes out of a prism, right? And say this is an individual single color, but it is really just a part of the infinite light spectrum.
Yeah, it's a good example.
Okay.
But remember, the visible light spectrum is very small the spectrum of what we call light.
Yeah, I'm not going into that necessarily.
But
I'm just saying,
you can
keeping that in mind. Yeah.
And you can split it into an infinity.
And it's a singularity, a single color, which is part of an infinity of light and colors, right? And a white light is a single light, but made up of an infinite amount of colors within it. Okay, this is the same way as human beings in the universe. This is another model. Okay, and also a way that you can translate to the Big Bang, right? We see a single point that they say expanded into a universe, which contained the infinity inside of it, and then created a bunch of singularities out within the universe which are infinities themselves. So I think that it's a very esoteric and metaphysical understanding to the universe that's going to be needed in the theory of everything, because it's going to have to involve life and death and everything that we understand about it, you know?
Yeah, let's talk about that because we've talked. I've questioned you heavily in the past about this. Um, does the theory of everything explain everything?
Yes.
I think your answer previously was no.
Well, it does and it doesn't. And you love that because that's exactly how it works. It does and it doesn't. It does because it explains the loops of infinity. Okay? So it explains that you can never explain it. And that's how the theory of everything will explain. So, when we come to a conclusion or we come to find, oh, this is the smallest thing we can find, or this is the biggest thing that we find, right? It's going to flip inverse at that point, and we're going to start going in reverse, but we're going to think we're going bigger, and it's always going to loop back around. Always. The whole entire universe and every system in the universe is a loop, and we can start at a point in that loop. It's like measuring a circle, Dave. You can start at the point on one side and take a measurement around and say, this is some formula with pi, right? This is the distance around this circle. But in reality, there is no length to that circle. It's continuous. And that's how measuring the universe works.
But what about life and consciousness and the spectrum of life that we have, right? From the most basic bacteria or virus, even a bacteria, I feel like, is way more alive than even a virus. A virus is just something that's floating out there, a chemical, and then it attaches to something and it reproduces, right? And then you build up this spectrum into consciousness like we have, and we see it in animals, not all animals, and there's a range, right? So
yeah, I mean,
I got a pet tortoise, and it is dumb as a rock.
Well, we think it is anyway, right? It might be a lot smarter than us. Who knows? Yeah. Right? But I hear what you're saying, and I think that we've talked about this, or I have recently with you, on the realm of what drives us to make the choices we make. Where do ideas come from? And why do we have all these ideas compared to the tortoise that doesn't have many ideas at all, right? And, all the great thinkers in the past have thought about where the ideas come from that they have. And I think it is, like we talked about, it's part of that ether. It's part of that interconnection that all human beings have, this one universe, this oneness with God that we have. And through
like a consciousness field.
Yeah.
That we're interacting with.
I mean, we could even say that it behaves quantumly, right? We're in a field of consciousness, and each of our minds are acting as particles.
But I want to really separate it from the idea of a theory of everything, because when I say a theory of everything, and as we're talking about it right now, if the theory of everything is deterministic and it's all just about small particles interacting, then you could theoretically say that I don't have any free will. Even though I have the perception of free will, I am just a record that's playing. Well, and I don't want to believe that. Right? There has to be, if that's the case, that's fine. But I don't want it to be that. I want it to be where consciousness is something totally different.
Yeah.
Okay. So the theory of everything defines all these things that we're touching and we feel in our bodies and our even, the physical
it should explain more
components of our mind and whatnot. But the conscious life element.
Yeah.
Is that the same?
Yeah.
Or is it different?
I think it is. That's what I was just saying about the theory of everything is going to have to be a very esoteric,
so is it predictable? Is it predictable what I'm going to do?
I think that you've just led a perfect segue to our next topic that we'll talk about in our next discussion, and I think it should be the non-deterministic versus deterministic world. And it's a great topic because I have such a strong belief in that human beings are the non-deterministic, and then matter and inorganic objects and things that we live around are the deterministic part of the world, and that's the duality being the non-deterministic and duistic, or and deterministic existing together. So giving us free will, giving us the birth of free will. So I mean, I think that's a great conversation for next time. It'll be a long conversation because it's all about nature of consciousness and all that, and we love that stuff. But yeah, I mean, as far as light goes, I think that light and the Big Bang and where light came from and all these theories that people are using to explain this, like we said in the last video, the way we're sure everything is where it is out in the universe. This is completely, it's misleading. When we talk about light, how can you have the same conversation in the same day about how light travels and bends everywhere, and then also, this is what's out there 100 million light years straight away? It just doesn't make any sense. Seems a little insane, actually.
Yeah, let's remember the furthest thing that we have sent from the Earth hasn't even reached what we call the Oort cloud, right? This theorized sphere of stuff around the sun. We haven't even gotten there yet.
Yeah.
So again, we're just so small, so insignificant, and
we know nothing.
We know nothing.
And that's the whole point, right? And it usually is, and it isn't. And anybody telling you that it is one thing or it isn't one thing, they're wrong. They got to realize everything, it's just that perspective at that time.
And that's a key thing. Anytime somebody tells me they know something to be true, I also know the exact opposite is also true.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep. And the truth lies in the middle.
Yeah.
Yep. As the Fulcrum of Truth says.
Yeah.
All right.
All right, man.
All right.
Good conversation.
Thanks. Good.
Subscribe, like.
Yes. Thanks a lot.